Shalom and welcome back. Now we're going to talk about the hey directive versus the el preposition. So, how does the hey directive function in relationship to the el preposition? Crazy enough, a lot of your grammar books are going to say, well, they mean the same thing. It's illogical. I'm sorry. It's illogical that you can say they mean the same thing, and here's why. Number one, let's use this sentence here. We're going to use the same exact sentence structure. We're only going to change two elements, which we can literally do in Hebrew. Here we're going to use the word hu halach el ha'ir, he went to the city, versus hu halach ha'ira, he went toward the city. In English, we have two words, to and toward. These two words are very special, and the reason why they're special is because they don't actually mean the same thing. To always is referring to the result of an action, versus toward is always versus in relationship to the direction of the action. And so we actually find that this is the same thing we find in Hebrew. That in Hebrew, whenever the hey directive is used, we're actually referring to the direction. Whereas when the result, we're utilizing to. El is used in two major ways. One is used with verbs of speech. Number two, it's used with verbs of movement. If we were to divide these up into two categories, when do we use el in regard to direction, and when we use el in regard to result, is only in relationship to this one category, speech. Speech is the only one where el is used as the same thing we'd have in English, to or toward, okay? And this with regard to speech. He spoke to the man, or he spoke toward the man. These two things would be in relationship to how el would function as a dual purpose when in relationship we're talking about the issue of speech. However, when we subdivide it into two categories of movement, this is where we have to deal with the issue of el versus the hey directive. When we're dealing with the issue of movement, el talks about the result, versus the hey directive talks about the direction. And this is when we're dealing with the issue of movement. So in speech, we find that we only use one word, el. Whereas in movement, we use two forms, el and the hey directive. And so the movement we're going to find, and there's a list of them. I made a whole list. If you want to see the list of all of the possibilities that you can predominantly get an understanding of, it's a very good exhaustive list that deals with the issue of what nouns we use hey directives with. You're talking about land masses, you're talking about fixed structures, you're talking about land regions. Those are the things that the words that the hey directives always are going to be attached to. So two exceptions that are special is going to be toward heaven and toward the earth. Those are the two that are outside of it. So when we're talking about land masses, land structures, we're talking about land regions, that's when we're going to attach the hey directive. So for example, we have like the words for like land masses, okay? We use midbar. Midbar, for the wilderness. He'd say hamidbara, okay? Land structures, a city, or a house. Ir, ha'ira, habayt, habayta, okay? Now, the same thing can be said, he went to the wilderness, el hamidbar, as you could say he went hamidbara, which is toward the wilderness. Notice the differentiation. If I'm using el hamidbar, I'm talking about the result not the direction. When I use the word Hamid Barra, I'm talking about the direction and not the result. And that's the part that we really have to understand. We have to understand that there's a very strong significance, like English, where we separate to versus toward. To, which tells me the result of an action, where toward tells me the direction of the action. And this is important because one of the sad things about that's just been around, unfortunately, too much is the lack of seeing that there obviously is a distinction between the two different forms. And how people translate everything like it's all the same thing, but it's not. I mean, that's why I pointed out this sentence where, you would say, why would you use two completely different grammatical forms to express the exact same thing? It's not even a grammatical logic. It doesn't even make sense on a grammatical scale. There's no logic as to why would you take two different forms and say they mean the exact same thing. It never works that way. The reason you have two different forms is because you're distinguishing one element from that of another. So that's why when we're looking at here, we say, Hu halach el ha'ir, he went to the city. So we know that the result of his going was the city. When we look at Hu halach ha'ira, he went toward the city, we know the direction of movement was in direction of the city. It's not telling us that he's at the city, he's telling us he's heading toward the city. With this one, he went to the city, we're literally saying he's at the city. That's why the difference between the result and the direction is given is based upon the context of what we're utilizing it. So go ahead, remember this again. When we're dealing with L is going to inquire result and direction only with verbs of speech. When we're dealing with the issues of movement, we're always going to find that L is going to be used in correlation with the hey directive when we're dealing with the issue of direction. And that should predominantly just, make everything make sense to you as you begin to sit there and realize that this is how you utilize the hey directive versus the L preposition and the importance of it. So we'll see you next time as we make more videos and we construct more sentences and more arguments over how to use grammar properly on this channel. I'll see you next time.